Tonight on Ukraine Today, a fateful meeting in Moscow, what didn't Putin agree on with Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff, and how is that already shaping events on the ground? Ukrainian drones in action. A wave of attack on key enemy targets, including a refinery, a logistics hub and an air defense base. Russian aggression expanding. The first train carrying Russian troops and military equipment have arrived in Belarus for the West 2025 drills. A three-way summit? Could a meeting between Zelensky and Putin with Trump at the table actually happen in the near future? All that and more coming up right now. Hello, my name is Volodymyr Rabchun. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get into the news. Let's start with the big meeting that happened in Moscow and work our way from there. So, Russia's dictator Vladimir Putin met with Steve Witkoff, the special envoy of Donald Trump. It happened exactly 2 days before Trump's deadline from his earlier ultimatum. According to open sources, the Kremlin was the one who initiated this meeting. Here's how the day unfolded.
Witkoff in Moscow, Russia's last chance to reach an agreement with the United States. Putin is not afraid of Trump's threats and has no intention of ending the war. There is only 1 day left before the ultimatum begins, and the Kremlin might actually be forced to stop shelling Ukraine. We've gathered the latest details on the negotiations between Russia and the US for you. Trump's special representative, Steve Witkoff, has finally made it to Moscow. On Wednesday, he held talks with Putin that lasted a full 3 hours.
I'm convinced that Witkoff isn't going there to deliver anything. Witkoff is only going to listen to what Putin might have to say to him. Well, Putin might voice his vision for ending the war. Witkoff can pass that on to Trump, but the question is, will Trump agree to it? Well, that remains an open question. If it's the same nonsense about the 4 regions plus Crimea plus some other things, then obviously he won't agree to that.
At the same time, it was specifically stated that the meeting was requested by the Russian side. Accordingly, Russia is clearly in a losing position right now. Analysts explain, after seeing Trump's resolve with sanctions against India and Brazil, Russia realized that he had moved from words to action, and now they are trying to minimize the pressure on their already not-so-strong economy.
The story with the tariffs is 100% just the beginning. Obviously, if Trump starts doing this, from there he'll only have to keep escalating. In other words, with each subsequent decision, they will toughen their stance toward the Russian Federation and in fact toward everything it does. That's why, if Russia wants to avoid all of this, their only option is to demonstrate before the 8th a real need to sit down at the negotiating table. It seems to me that the only way they can do this is with a clear statement, down to the exact date, maybe even the hour, about a ceasefire. At the very least, a cessation of hostilities. I think the likelihood that Russia will announce this on the 8th is actually minimal. And most likely, at the very least, they will have to face the first stage of sanctions pressure.
Analysts say that the US understands this as well. However, by sending Witkoff to Moscow for the 5th time, Trump is also pursuing his own interests. Above all, against the backdrop of the Epstein scandal and the decline in the American president's approval ratings, he is showing his voters that he did everything possible before finally falling out with Russia.
He probably still has some hope that it will be possible to reach an agreement with Russia and that Russia will end the war in a relatively short time. At the very least, he has to use this opportunity, try to take this chance so that later he can come out and tell part of his audience, which is quite skeptical about the US pursuing an active foreign policy, that he tried. Here, the issue is not even so much about the Russian-Ukrainian war. That is, he has a lot of people who are, by their nature, isolationists, people who voted for Trump. And so he'll come out in front of them and say, look, I tried this and that and the other thing. I even tried to meet Putin halfway. I offered him this and that, but he rejected everything. And with a person like that, you can only communicate from a position of strength.
However, according to as yet unconfirmed information, Putin is hoping to wriggle out of it this time as well. Several Western media outlets report that the concession to Trump, something he could latch onto, would not be a ceasefire, but rather a temporary halt to air attacks, that is, strikes by Shaheds, ballistic and cruise missiles. They are also considering a freeze on those fronts where Russia cannot advance.
A halt is being prepared on all fronts except for Donbas and Luhansk regions. Well, this could happen precisely on the 8th. If it doesn't happen, the Financial Times says that Trump is then preparing new sanctions against the Russian shadow fleet. According to sources, the Trump administration is considering imposing additional sanctions against the Russian shadow fleet, a network of outdated tankers that the Kremlin uses to transport oil in circumvention of Western sanctions. These actions could become the first example of new US sanctions against Moscow after Trump's return to the White House.
Analysts view the idea of a partial ceasefire with considerable skepticism. First of all, it's simply impossible to control in the current realities of war. Secondly, it's all in the best traditions of the Kremlin, completely vague.
It's hard to understand how this could be implemented, considering that a significant number of these drones are, well, like Molniya-type drones, which operate in the frontline zone up to 100 kilometers. Again, so will the ceasefire apply to them? Again, there are FPV strike drones with a range of up to 25 kilometers. Will fiber optics apply to them, or will this only concern drones like Shahed and cruise and ballistic missiles?
Moreover, according to Russian sources, Moscow is not ready to consider any long-term agreements. Russia really does have a need for regrouping and bringing in reserves at the moment. According to experts, this will take a little over a week. Once this process is completed, in the event of a ceasefire, provocations and a breakdown of the truce are expected from Russia.
I suspect that most likely it will come from the Russian side in the format of let's stop the air attacks, but only say for 3 or 4 days, or let's say a week until we, I don't know, develop some kind of protocol or agree on some plans, meetings, negotiations with the Ukrainian side. That is, it seems to me that in any case, they will add some kind of nuance to this proposal that is impossible to fulfill from the start. Or they will continue, like, to make this ceasefire only for a very short period. Basically, to appease Trump as much as possible, like, look, we're at least making some kind of step toward your position. But on the other hand, so that it doesn't actually affect the war.
At the same time, Reuters reports that Putin is not intimidated by Trump's ultimatums, and the Russian dictator does not believe that sanctions can actually bring down the Russian economy. 3 sources from the Kremlin, as claimed by the agency, told Reuters that the bunker dweller is convinced he can win the war, and that the new US sanctions will not have a significant impact on Russia.
I think he has been convinced that the Ukrainian armed forces are exhausted and about to collapse, and he sincerely believes that the Ukrainian front will soon fall, and that Russian forces will march on Kyiv, capturing the 4 regions he wrote into the Russian constitution. Moreover, some of the Z supporters who try to look at what's happening with at least some sense of reality also don't see any prerequisites for large-scale breakthroughs or any sharp changes to the front line.
However, Putin won't be able to realize this until autumn, when the weather will finally bury the Russian offensive of 2025. It is at that point, political analysts believe, that he will become more amenable and agree to real negotiations and concessions. However, the United States could make adjustments. Exactly how and to what extent will be up to Trump to decide. For now, it remains unclear whether there will be pressure on Putin.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Right after the meeting, Trump had a phone call with Zelensky, and here's where it gets interesting. Ukraine's president said that European leaders also joined the call. Speaking from the Sumy region, Zelensky emphasized that everyone's position is clear. The war must end, and it must end fairly.
We discussed what was said in Moscow. It seems Russia is now more inclined toward a ceasefire. The pressure is working, but the key thing is that they must not fool us with the details. Not us, not the United States. And we suggested that in the near future, representatives of Ukraine and our partners, our national security advisors, should meet to define our position, our joint stance, and our shared vision. For us, for Ukraine, this is extremely important. Ukraine will definitely defend its independence. What we all need is a lasting and reliable peace. Russia must end the war it started. I thank everyone who stands with us, with our people, with Ukraine, with our state. Glory to Ukraine.
So, yes, we have heard it before. The war must end. But it looks like Putin proposed something serious enough to bring everyone into one conversation. Next, Trump posted a statement on Truth Social. My special envoy, Steve Witkoff, just had a highly productive meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Great progress was made. Afterwards, I updated some of our European allies. Everyone agrees this war must come to a close, and we will work towards that in the days and weeks to come. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Something new? Not really. Every time Witkoff meets with Putin, Trump posts about great progress. And then days later, we hear something completely different. Trump expresses frustration. He says Putin is stalling. And here comes another twist. This time it seems like Trump may not have believed Putin. We'll get back to that. But first, before we ask what Putin might have offered Wittkopf, let's focus on what definitely didn't happen. There was no ceasefire. Not at all. Not even a limited one in the air. Last night, Russia launched 112 drones at peaceful Ukrainian cities and towns. Our air defense forces intercepted 89 of them, but 23 got through, hitting 11 different locations. There were explosions in Dnipro and Kryvyi Rih. In Nikopol, Russian artillery killed 3 people, including a rescuer, Danilo Khizhniak. He was just 23 years old. They hit a state emergency service vehicle right after it arrived at the place of a previous strike. 4 more people were injured. Near Kramatorsk, the enemy FPV drone hit Ukrposhta, Ukrainian post service vehicle. The head of the mobile post office, 46 years old Olga Bordunova, was killed. The driver was wounded. Russia also continued bombing Kherson with guided bombs, trying to destroy the bridge connecting the island district to the city center. Meanwhile, Ukrainian drones struck multiple targets inside Russia. There was a fire at a military base in Kuban. A refinery in the Krasnodar region was hit. So was a Russian logistics hub at a railway station in the Volgograd region. There were also loud explosions in temporarily occupied Crimea. Ukrainian intelligence drones destroyed key military sites there. Among them, a landing boat, several radar systems, and an air defense base on Mount Aipetri. And here's the toll. In just the last 24 hours, Russia lost at least 1,040 troops killed and wounded. That brings the total number of Russian personnel losses since the start of the full-scale invasion to 1,060,310. In addition, Ukrainian defense forces destroyed 4 Russian tanks, 4 armored vehicles, 47 artillery systems, and dozens more pieces of Russia's military gear. So, no ceasefire. What else didn't happen? Putin didn't drop his plan to expand the war. A Russian military train has arrived in Belarus, bringing troops and equipment for the West 2025 drills scheduled for September. At the same time, Lukashenko's regime is preparing changes to Belarusian martial law to allow for immediate mobilization at any time. That's happening as Russia's dictator still wants to kill, steal and destroy. More details in the next report.
Belarus is planning to introduce martial law because of Russia's war against Ukraine.
As you understand, you are educated and literate people. It's not only during war and military actions that we have to mobilize, but also in peacetime. Consider that we are living in a very difficult peacetime when military mobilization is necessary.
According to the new law from the Belarusian Ministry of Defense, an armed attack on the Union state by any country will be considered grounds for introducing martial law. Does this mean that Belarus is preparing for war with Ukraine?
There aren't really any clear and compelling signs that the Belarusian state, in its current precarious and challenging situation, is actually genuinely ready to fully join the Russian army in a direct, unprovoked and aggressive military action against Ukraine, which would undoubtedly have severe international repercussions. There are also the sentiments of the Belarusians themselves, and to be quite honest, they consistently try to stay entirely out of the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Previously, there were regular rumors about a new offensive against Ukraine from Belarus, about covert mobilization, but Lukashenko denied everything every time.
We are peaceful people. We know what war is. We do not want war. And under no circumstances are we planning to send our troops into Ukraine unless you launch aggression against Belarus from there. That's all. That's my answer. So why should I have to justify myself yet again, saying that there is no mobilization? You know, they're all shouting at the top of their lungs about a secret or covert mobilization. But I'm bringing you back down to earth.
Then why is a new law needed, as well as the Belarusian dictators talk about preparing for war in recent months?
Girls, get ready. If war breaks out, you'll at the very least...
We sincerely hope it won't start at all.
Well, I hope so too, but in any case, we're preparing for war. Who today can say for sure that World War III won't break out? We're closer to it now than ever before, closer than ever.
Experts claim that Putin may be preparing to attack the Baltic states through the territory of Belarus.
A corresponding special operation is being prepared by Putin, aimed at the countries of the European Union and NATO. Such a provocation could actually take, well, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 days, roughly speaking, 3 or 4 days, and that's it. There's no need to fight anyone there. It could simply territorially separate, well, in a way, the European Union and the Baltic states. Moreover, similar special operations could take place simultaneously within the Baltic states themselves.
I'm not ready to say whether aggression will be used, whether aggression will be applied, but the very fact of creating these threats and risks will lead to certain consequences. Because if Ukraine is forced to pull some of its reserves, it will have fewer forces and less capability to defend its territories at the line of contact, to liberate its territories. I think this might be the plan of both Putin and his ally Lukashenko.
Russia and Belarus have already scheduled joint military exercises, Zapad 2025, for mid-September. Experts claim that under the cover of these exercises, covert formation of offensive troop groupings may be taking place.
At the moment, Europe is only in the process of creating its own army and scaling up its military-industrial complex. Meanwhile, the position of the United States remains unstable under Trump. This needs to be taken advantage of. And don't forget, 2025 is again a peak year for military spending within the Russian Federation itself. They will only undertake such a special operation in one case, if they are certain there will be no response and that Europe will call for negotiations. And this essentially is exactly what Putin wants.
According to experts, Putin does not intend to fight with Europeans. He needs destabilization and the destruction of a strong Europe.
Another one of Putin's special operations. But he does not plan to wage war against NATO countries or the European Union. He plans to create a military provocation for them that will raise many pressing questions, questions that Europeans themselves tend to turn a blind eye to. The first question, does NATO's Article 5 actually work? Are the United States truly prepared to engage in direct military confrontation with the world's largest nuclear power, the Russian Federation? How will the European Union respond to this?
Will Lukashenko really take the risks that come with helping Putin in his latest adventure? And whether his claims that Belarusians are peaceful and do not attack anyone will work this time? The question remains open.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. And don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share this video. It helps the channel grow. Thank you. Trump's ultimatum still stands. He's threatening to increase sanctions and tariffs against Russia and against those who fund its war if aggression continues. White House officials say new sanctions will kick in this Friday, August 8th. Trump has already signed an executive order imposing an additional 25% tariff on Indian goods. And Washington is warning that similar measures could be used against other countries that import Russian oil. At the same time, US support for Ukraine isn't going anywhere. Long-range missiles may soon be on the list. But while that's being discussed, Washington is preparing to allocate $200 million to repair Ukrainian howitzers. More details right now.
Almost $500 million for the purchase of American weapons. Norway, Sweden and Denmark are allocating $486 million to purchase overseas defensive weaponry as part of a NATO initiative. The aid will be provided under the new prioritized Ukrainian Requirement List initiative. Assistance under PURL will ensure the rapid delivery of weapons and equipment to Ukraine to strengthen air defense, in particular the procurement of missiles for the Patriot system. This summer, we have witnessed Russia relentlessly continuing its illegal attacks against Ukraine along the front line and against civilian targets in cities. With this contribution, we aim to facilitate Ukraine's rapid access to the necessary equipment while also strengthening NATO cooperation on Ukraine's defense and ensuring peace on Ukraine's terms. Tore Sandvik, Minister of Defense of Norway. The Netherlands has already funded an aid package of similar value, and in the near future, several more such packages will be provided under Pearl. These aid packages include support for air defense, ammunition, and other essential equipment. Each aid package will have an approximate value of $500 million. In parallel with this initiative, the United States has approved the sale to Ukraine of maintenance services for the M777 howitzers worth more than $200 million. The agreements consist of 2 contracts. The State Department has decided to approve the possible sale to the government of Ukraine abroad of equipment, repair services, and operational support for M777 howitzers and related equipment totaling about $104 million. The Defense Security Cooperation Agency has provided the required certification, notifying Congress. The deliveries will include technical assistance, training, instructions, and other elements of logistics and support. The main contractor will be BAE Systems UK. The second contract provides for the provision of transportation and logistics services to Ukraine. The government of Ukraine has requested the purchase of transportation and cargo consolidation services to support security assistance programs, as well as other related elements of logistics and program support. The total estimated cost is $99.5 million. The proposed sale will help achieve the foreign policy goals and national security objectives of the United States by enhancing Ukraine's ability to provide for its own defense. The administration of US President Trump is also considering the possibility of supplying Ukraine with JASSM cruise missiles for the F-16. The first JASSM missiles have a range of about 370 kilometers. More advanced versions are capable of striking targets at distances of up to 1,000 kilometers. The JASSM entered service in 2003 and combined limited radar evasion capabilities with a high level of targeting accuracy and a warhead payload of 450 kilograms. Currently, this missile is operated by 4 countries, including Poland, which received 110 for its F-16 fighters. Other Cold War-era fighters in service with Ukraine, namely the Su-27 and Su-24M inherited from the Soviet Union, have already been modified to launch the British and French cruise missiles Storm Shadow and Scalp, which have some comparable characteristics to the JASSM. And although Trump himself stated 2 weeks ago that he is not considering supplying Ukraine with long-range missiles, sources in the White House claim that this issue has already been under discussion for quite some time. And as we know, Trump changes his mind very quickly.
So now, let's circle back to that Moscow meeting. What could have happened? What was important enough to involve world leaders, but not enough to cancel Trump's ultimatum? Here's one version. Putin may have agreed to a direct meeting with Zelensky. Not one-on-one, but face-to-face in presence of Trump. The White House responded that Trump is open to the idea if positions of Kyiv, Moscow and Europe can be brought closer. But that's a big if. Right now, those positions are still very, very far apart. And finally, a bit of humor tied to that possible meeting between Zelensky, Trump and Putin. Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Zelensky'S analyzed footage of Putin meeting with Lukashenko and later with Witkov. He joked that there may have been more than one Putin involved. He even challenged viewers to spot the difference between them. But where is the Putin proper? Or neither? So which Putin will show up to meet Zelensky and Trump? That is, if the meeting happens at all. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share this video. See you next time.